Well, thank you to Elan and congratulations to the team for a fantastic start to the Hummus series. Photojournalism in a world of crisis. We will be joined now by a distinguished panel of photojournalists who will share their experiences, both physical and emotional, when it comes to covering conflict and crisis. Susan Sontag wrote, "We can't imagine how dreadful, how terrifying war is, and how normal it becomes." For photographer Sergei Korodov, war has been a constant since he was 18. In an interview published in Mint, Sergei said, "I always wanted to be a photographer, but I never wanted to be a war photographer. I lost the privilege of deciding when Russia invaded the Donbass." Yet while going through Sergei's work, what struck me was the lack of conflict. What I saw was dignity. He says, "I strive for empathy in my photography. I care about Ukraine, the people. This is not a story. This is the life I live. I'm not interested in seeing it otherwise. Photojournalism gives me the right to be personal." Sergei also told me that as a citizen of Ukraine, he is grateful that visiting journalists keep them on the front page. It is hard to live in this time, but it is history. And not at all to make light of this time in history, but it should still be noted that Sergei's mentor at Syracuse University, Mike Davis, says of him, "In spite of everything, his smile enters the room before he does. His personality melts barriers, allowing him to make memorable, intimate photographs." Please welcome Sergei to the Siena stage. Surfer, drummer, foodie, educator, photographer, storyteller, joyful, honest, generous. When I spoke with friends and colleagues of photographer Michael Robinson Chavez, they were all on the same page. He is the life of the party, not because he wants the attention, but because he brings an energy that is contagious, an appreciation for everyone in the room. His editor at the Washington Post, Natalia Jimenez, told me, "It is so Michael to always know how to make us all stronger, to be ourselves yet strive to be better. He is such a trusted voice." He is also a fantastic photographer, a two-time Pulitzer winner with a career spent between the Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, Boston Globe, and the Associated Press. Michael has now embraced the freelance lifestyle. His most recent work includes the impact of climate change on the Bay of Bengal, migration along the US-Mexican border, and the conflict in Ukraine. As his friend, photographer Hector Emanuel told me, Michael is not driven by aesthetics. He is driven by story. He can do it all because he isn't selfish. It is always about the story. Please welcome Michael to the stage. Photographer Carolyn Van Houten told me that being present wherever I am is what helps keep me balanced. That and some good cat time when she is home. Being present is what made her realize that a love of physics was not going to translate into a fulfilling career. The night before an exam, sharing her doubts with her father, he suggested that after the test, she walk over to the university's photo department. She did, and here we are. And I suspect that when assignments take her to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Mexico, or various locations within the US, her father might wish that she had stuck with equations and variables instead of f-stops and long stretches on the road. Yet it is immersion in these different places that brings Carolyn's strengths to the fore. While her niche at the Washington Post is looking at how policy, particularly climate, impacts communities, it is her sensitivity, her ability to connect with people that informs her photography. As her friend, photo editor Mallory Benedict told me, Carolyn leads with empathy and compassion. She imparts dignity to the people she photographs. That is what makes her work so special. Please welcome Carolyn to the stage. Unfortunately, Adris Latif could not join us today, so Salwan George will moderate the panel. And in the early days of the war in Ukraine, Salwan made a photograph of a woman on a train. She was looking out through a steamy window, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hand pressed against the glass to connect with her husband. When describing that image to me, former director of photography at the Washington Post, Marianne Golan, said, "I feel his photographs before I see them." There is a purity to Salwan, a purity to his heart and his vision, the way in which he relates to people. He is a unicorn. Salwan could relate to the emotions that he captured on that train platform. He told me, "Home is not a place. Home is where your loved ones are. You make home." He believes that his mission is to raise awareness that photojournalism is important because storytelling can affect change, and treating people with respect, with dignity, is the key. Given that Salwan has been named Photographer of the Year by both Pictures of the Year International and the National Photographers Association, and has been both a finalist and winner of the Pulitzer, I would say that his stories do have an impact. Whether he is reporting on the fentanyl crisis, racial reckoning, or climate change, he gets to the heart of every story. And that image of the woman on the train, so powerful that Salwan was Siena's 2023 Photographer of the Year. So please welcome him home to Siena.
Okay, good to be home. Thanks everyone for being here, and I would like to thank Luca and Siena Awards for bringing us all here today. We're lucky, we have 3 of the world's best photographers here in the building, and they have, between them, they have experienced some of the most recent event and some of the biggest world events. We're very lucky to have you guys, and they agreed to share some behind the scene with us. Carolyn, you're up first. Please talk us through this image and tell us what exactly happening.
Yes, so this image is from the border in Matamoros, Mexico, and it was in the final hours of Title 42, which is a COVID-era policy. And basically what's happening is that these men were trying to cross before the Title 42 ended so that they could get asylum. And in this moment, they had gotten into the river and they did not realize basically the vegetation had hidden the reality of the depth of the river. And so they were trying to carry this baby across, but they were also trying not to drown themselves. And so they had the baby face down in the water. And all of us on the sides were screaming, like, the baby is drowning, the baby is drowning. And so this was a moment where the baby got flipped back because they realized, and it was taking its first breath again after quite a while underwater.
Such an important image. And I wanted to ask you, how difficult was it for you to witness this situation and not being able to do anything about it? Like, did you face the internal, ethical dilemma?
Great question. I think all of us here have faced similar issues of at what point do you put down the camera and do something to help the situation versus document it. And In this case, it was a very clear-cut thing. I was pretty far away. I was up on a hill, and I think if any of us had jumped in, we would have added to the problem of more people drowning and not actually helping. And so thankfully, everyone on the riverbank was doing everything we could, which is to make sure the people who could do something about it were.
Yeah, and can you please also tell us a little bit some of the journey that a lot of these immigrants go through and the difficulty, and also this is the last stage before you enter the U.S., which could be the last, a lot of deaths happens here because the river is very dangerous. So can you please tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, of course. So actually, in a couple of years prior, I had walked across Mexico with the migrant caravans and seen a lot of that journey, but yeah, it's filled with all sorts of things from extortion and cartels and to, frankly, heat exhaustion and food insecurity along the way. And then actually, Matamoros is one of the most dangerous sections of the U.S. border. And so shortly before this happened at this exact spot, actually a couple of Americans were kidnapped by cartels. And so that's kind of the situation that we can leave and we get to go back home, and they are camped out on the Mexican side in Matamoros for months.
Thank you. Sergey.
Hello.
Hello. The last time we saw each other was on the first day of the Russian invasion of Ukraine a few years ago in Kharkiv. Since then, you've been living in Ukraine, documenting your home during this war. Please tell us a little bit about this image of Katrina and what has it been like for you?
Yeah, hi Salvan and hi everyone. And I want to say that this meeting is much more pleasant in a much nicer environment. And of course, I'm doing solo war photography for the past 2.5 years. It's my full-time job documenting Russian war in Ukraine. And I mostly work, I'm trying to do as much work as I could in the eastern Ukrainian region of Donbass, where I'm from. And this is eastern Ukraine shelter where this lady, Katerina Penzieva, she's 85. She's sitting there, being evacuated from her house in Mikhailivka village. It's a small village.
In the Donbass, right?
In the Donbass, yeah,
Okay.
Pokrovsk direction. You might hear about it in news. It's a big battle now. Russians are pushing, and people like Katerina are forced to leave their houses, their lives behind. I mean, her story is just heartbreaking because her daughter, her son-in-law were killed a few days ago by a Russian shell, and she's sitting there all alone. I mean, she talked to me, and then she just took her time sitting and saying, "I wish I would die instead." And it was like super heartbreaking. And in a few days, this shelter itself was also shelled by Russians. Luckily, like all people, we already took away, but it's just like one tiny story of the insanity of what's happening in Ukraine now.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a lot of times wars are dignified by guns, missiles, and bullets, but in the aftermath, the destructions, but in this case, Sergey has put a very personal touch with a portrait of a woman that resonates with many, many people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you wanted to add something?
No, I just wanted to say that that's the face of war.
Yeah.
I mean, I have like hundreds of images of artillery shelling, firefighters rushing to missile attack place, and that's all like super important. But I guess I just want to show rather Katerina portrait.
Thank you. Michael, you have been working as a photographer for the last 3 decades, including being colleagues, some of us here. Everyone have met you here on stage in different places. You have been around all over the world covering stories, but on January 6, 2021, the world's biggest story happened to come to your own background. How do you feel about witnessing this event, not having to travel on another plane across the world to cover a story?
Certainly far less jet lag, but It's really wonderful to be here, and I just want to thank Sienna Awards for this wonderful opportunity of being here. Yes, it was a day that will be difficult to forget. Having covered the fall of governments and coup attempts throughout the world, it was strange to be covering a coup attempt 45 minutes from home in a building that I knew too well, and often when I was assigned assignments up on Capitol Hill, they were dreaded, right? Because they're usually very boring. You go up there and it's a committee meeting, and once in a while there's some drama, but more often than not there isn't. But on this particular day, when Trump was giving his speech in the ellipse outside the White House, and you could see the fervor of the crowd building, and they were getting angrier and angrier, it was getting very ugly, and it was really obvious that there were not enough police up there to quell this incident that was about to unfold. I was a target, along with all of our colleagues, by them because they hate the media to no uncertain end, and I dressed as much like an amateur photographer as possible. Mm-hmm. But when they ask who do you work for, I'm not going to lie. I told them the Washington Post, and of course that set them into a rage. Yeah. But then you just try to find things to kind of disarm the crowd a little bit, to just make yourself a little more human. So in the event things do get really bad, they may not all pounce on you, because nothing's more frightening than a mob. I mean, mobs are the most dangerous thing you can encounter. But it was one of those days, too, where it was all happening really fast, and when things are going really fast, and you have to slow it down to make pictures, that you're not just, okay, I'm here, I'm getting frames, but you're actually going to make photographs that are going to live on in history or have the iconic impact that they're supposed to have in an event of this magnitude. So I remember I took a deep breath and stopped making pictures for what seemed an eternity, but I think it was like 30 seconds or something, and just slowed down and let things unfold around me and started making these pictures. And when these idiots started climbing the side of the Senate wall, I knew, okay, this is it, the dome in the background. No one's seen this before. It's a coup in the U.S., and that was it. That was like the moment, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the first time I think ever happened, and we couldn't believe it, us living in America. But with your experience, how do you avoid hostiles all over the world, including that day? You talked a little bit about it. Can you tell us a little bit more? How do you manage staying safe in those kind of places where you could be a target?
Well, I mean, it varies, right, depending on where you are, whether you're in Ukraine or in the Middle East or what have you, or in Baltimore. It really it depends on where you are. And in this case, like I was saying, someone said, oh, we're here from Idaho and we're going to take back the country. And, oh, I did an internship at the Idaho Statesman. It's a beautiful place, the Snake River, blah, blah, blah. And immediately they don't know what to do. They just kind of, oh, you're right, it is beautiful. And then you start talking and you just try to keep the temperature down. In other places where I'm not talented enough to speak the language, you just kind of rely on whoever's helping you, or you just leave. You just kind of walk away, but it just varies on where you are.
Thank you. Carolyn, we're back on your last trip. You went to Afghanistan, recent trip a few months ago, was it? So this is very new work. So can you a little bit tell us where you are and what's happening in front of you?
Yes, so this scene was in Herat, which some of you may have heard. About 300 people were killed in a flood event, flash floods in Afghanistan, in Herat, and or really across Afghanistan. But so this scene, we came to the flood zone, and of course, as a woman, there's always this navigation of when do you reveal that we have a woman with us and also a photographer. And so in this case, we had arrived the night before and made this negotiation, and then I kind of just popped out of the car. And so we get to the scene, and it turns out that they didn't have an ambulance, and a lot of these climate disasters they don't have resources for, and so the Taliban actually was using a U.S. Humvee that they had themselves shot up during the war. You can see the bullet holes on the left side, as an ambulance to respond to the flood event. And so this scene was us arriving in one of the flood events, and you can see more of the Taliban police jumping out of the Hilux truck in the scene.
Thank you. As many know, like after the U.S. pulled out from Afghanistan in a disastrous way, access has been really hard. Women's rights has been taken away. So it's not the same country that was right before the takeover. So what an amazing access you have here, and in a male-dominated society right now. So can you please tell our audience a little bit about what kind of situation you had to deal with being as a woman photographer in a place that women is not a priority anymore?
I think, one thing is, as a Western woman, my privileges there are much different than for an Afghan woman. So, there were scenes where I could go into a park where women are banned and I would be the only woman. It depended on the day, and it depended on who we were with and how conservative they were. And so in this case, technically, they are not allowed to be in a car with a woman, particularly a Western woman. And so there was sort of always this navigation of, at what point do they care more about the story that we are telling than they care about me being in the car? And then one thing that would help is that my colleague who was with me, Rick, he is also Western, and so the presence of him kind of helped negate the presence of me a little bit, but it was still just always a negotiation. And the other thing is I couldn't speak, and I can't look anyone in the eye, and I can't do a lot of things. And so that negotiation was more organic, I would say.
So you kind of went prepared, knowing what could happen, and as a woman, and it's so important for all of us here is to really do the research and know what kind of situation you put in yourself in to be as safe as possible, because going to a culture, going to a new place, not knowing the tradition or the latest tradition with the Taliban, it could
It's
really
always changing.
Yeah, it's always changing, as you said. Thank you for sharing that. Sergey. So this image was taken in Kiev. Can you please tell us a little bit more about the time of the day? I believe it's night, and what's happening in the gold light that's coming up middle of nowhere?
Yeah. So for almost all of my pictures, it's hard to talk just of the image, not giving a bit more context. But so in fall 2022, when Russia understood they can't conquer Ukraine in a battlefield, and they started to lose really, they launched these attacks to power infrastructure. And this is October, November 2022, the first time we were introduced to blackouts, which are with us until now, honestly. I will go home after this and probably gonna have the same situation. It getting even worse and worse. And of course, I wanted to reflect on it as a photographer. And I was walking in my hometown now in Kiev, looking for the way to tell this story, not only to show this is dark, but probably to find some metaphor to make it more, to find a proper form to tell about this, those events. And I found this, it's complete dark city below me, Dnipro River, beautiful as always, and this one tiny block lit by street light, and I knew immediately it was it, because it's light in the dark, yes, and it's already a metaphor. It spoke to me about, it might be the end of the war one day, it might be light again. It speaks about love, about hope, about desire for peace, and I'm really, really happy that I was there at the time, and the picture just happened.
It definitely gives you
Sometimes
hope,
happening.
definitely. So please tell us a little bit more, since you are from Ukraine, living in Ukraine, the only one on the stage here where you are covering a war and living in it. So how do you work in a country that basically the environment with the infrastructure doesn't exist anymore, as Russia keeps going after Ukraine? And tell our audience, how do you keep your cameras charged? Just some of the simple things that you had to adapt to as the war continues in almost our third year right now.
Yeah, and honestly, blackouts are far not the biggest problem. They can't compare to missile attacks or to conditions of people living near the front line, but we all, everywhere, experience those, I mean, I can't say inconveniences, it's more than, especially when winter is coming, it's really, it's super inconvenient to get heat, not only to us, to like regular people, to hospitals, to infrastructure, to schools, etc., etc. You get like 1 to 4 hours per day of electricity, so you charge everything at once. And we got adopted a lot with, you walk in the dark street and you hear generators everywhere. You still can get a coffee in a complete darkness because like small businesses adopted big batteries, etc., etc. And I want to say it's more inconvenient in a psychological level. In a dark period of time, when it's, I mean, 8 hours of light per day, you live not only in the darkness because of winter, you also you coming home, it's dark, you getting up in the morning, it's dark, and it pressing you, and that's partially what Russia wants, to press on Ukrainian citizens to push for peace negotiations on their conditions because they don't succeed on the battlefield yet, and hopefully they will not. So it definitely pressing, but I would say, I can't say only about me, my circles, my family, friends, and people I know, we are holding up pretty all right.
I mean, Ukrainians can go without electricity for a little while, but not coffee.
Not coffee,
Gotta
yeah.
have coffee.
That was what I was about to ask. You know, a lot of us have seen Ukraine only the first few months or like been visited afterwards. For you, you've seen it every day since the war. So like, how has been the adaptation of people, like how they keep going?
Honestly, before it started, I wouldn't imagine myself in this situation being so all right with like everything from lack of electricity to like air raid alert. This is only kamikaze drones. It's right, they will be hit near the border of the city. Oh, it's ballistic. Okay, it's better to go to the shelter. So you just live through it, and if someone with a fresh eye like you guys come, you probably see how unnormal it is. And I know like dozens of stories with the title New Normality, but it is what it is. It's new normality.
Yeah, I gotta say real fast that I'm a little jealous of those Ukrainian Air Force socks. Those are fantastic.
F-16.
F-16, there you go.
Already
Those
in
are
Ukraine,
great,
thank
right?
you.
I'm getting a pair when I go next month. My man.
Good eye, Michael.
I can't miss. Look at that right here.
Okay, so Michael, we're back in the U.S., back at the U.S.-Mexico border. I wanted to ask you a question about this image, but also more of a personal question, because as former colleagues, and we know each other well, how difficult it's been for you as a father to witness a family separation unfolding in front of your eyes? And what did it take? I know a little bit about the background of this image, but a lot of our audience would love to know more about what did it take to reporting and capturing this image, and also your feeling as a father seeing this.
Yeah, this was in Ciudad Juarez on the border with El Paso, and this was part of a influx, and thousands, mainly Venezolanos, coming up through Darien, Mexico, and eventually arriving here with the hopes of gaining political asylum in the United States. And I was down there working with one of our colleagues from the Washington Post, and we knew that this was a popular crossing point because the Border Patrol on the US side had set up an area for them to be processed. It was almost this automatic way of doing things. But the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, had placed this razor wire, concertina wire, all along the border. And so to make it more difficult. So the federal government had actually not put that wire there. It was the state government, state of Texas. So it's always difficult, and being a father now, I mean, my daughter's 14 now, so it's been a bit, but it's always more difficult because it's easier to put yourself in those circumstances, right? What if these are your children, you're trying to create a better life? The other thing is I spent much of 2019, if you remember, in Venezuela,
Yes.
photographing the country essentially collapsing, infrastructure, economy, everything collapsing. So it was really easy to understand why so many were coming to this situation. And as Carolyn pointed out before, this was the last barrier. This was the last place for them to cross to get into the US. So this was especially poignant for me because, I mean, they're just negotiating this wire and the child has a diaper on, and it just kind of was sort of this intense ending for a journey that I can't even fathom how difficult it was for them, crossing the Darien Gap, for example, in Panama. So yeah, it's always difficult, right? But you know it's important, and you're there to tell a story. You know, we're all there to put all of you and all of the readers of the post or whatever in that situation, because obviously not everyone's going to want to go hang out on the border and do this,
That's true.
right?
That's true.
So it's a big responsibility. So yeah, I mean, a lot of feelings going through your head when you're making these pictures.
Would you say that being a father, when you start seeing this situation, it becomes harder and harder on a personal level? Because, you know, I mean, we all have empathy, we're all trying to share in the world what's happening, but for you on the stage as a father, when you go on the field on trips and you witness something that's heartbreaking, how do you go home and do you hug, I mean, of course, do you hug your daughter tighter? Like, please tell us, like, that the
Till her face turns blue. Just
the toll that takes on a photographer, especially being a father, photographing a situation, seeing family separation.
I mean, it's a good question, and honestly, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more poignant because of that, but at the same time, it's, you know, in a situation where we hadn't had children yet, it was even more impactful at times, because then you're wondering, do we want to have children, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of both sides of the coin, and you can ask yourself these questions, like, oh, you know, what kind of world are we in? And sometimes you know, it gets very overwhelming, but yeah, I do hug her a little tighter, and, you know, she says, "Dad," you know, it's like, but it's tough, but, you know, I try not to put myself in too many of those situations now, a little less so, part of the reason we moved to Spain.
We'll
but
talk more about it.
We
yeah.
can definitely get
Yeah.
into that later.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Carolyn, during your last trip to Afghanistan, you've captured this moment as well. As you've experienced recently, access has been really difficult. Sometimes you get access, sometimes you don't get access, sometimes you don't even get the visa to enter Afghanistan. You happened to go there recently. Can you please tell us, like, how did you manage to get this access to make this situation, and a little bit more about the background of what's happening here?
Yeah, of course. You know, as I mentioned, there are a lot of disadvantages to being and I'm going to clarify, a Western female photographer in Afghanistan, but there are a couple of benefits too. And so in this particular situation, and this happened a lot, where I would be with my male colleagues outside, and we'd be talking to the men, because the women are not outside, and all of a sudden someone would be like really quietly kind of like sneak out, or like one of the kids would like grab me and just pull me into, like, literally physically just pull me into the house. And so, and what that did was it opened up a whole world to me that my male colleagues would never get to see. And so it was really special. So this is Samaya and her kids, and what's really special to me about this image is actually that when I come home from trips, I like to weave, and I do textiles and things like that to kind of just process and decompress. And so it was really special to be able to come in here and not only get to, you know, speak and take my face covering down and smile and make eye contact and all these things that I can't do outside, but then we also got to bond over something that we both share a love for, and that's her loom in the background. Yeah, so.
Did you learn any new techniques with weaving from?
No, though I did learn about hand spinning wool, which I have no interest in. That's
Yeah.
so labor intensive. Yes.
Were you able to talk to this person about some of the recent challenges for being as a woman, as a person, Afghani living in Afghanistan, not as a person from the outside? Did they share some of the stuff that touched you and also made you feel like you have to document as much as you can because you just don't know, you may wake up tomorrow and get kicked out, put on a plane, you have to leave the country.
Yeah. So I think what's important to remember about Afghanistan is that every region is different. So, Kandahar is much more conservative than Herat. And so this was in Herat, so it was a little bit of a different dynamic. But, I think I had come from Kandahar, and we had actually drove to Herat through Helmand. And so we'd seen a lot of different evolution of how people were existing. And I remember pulling into Herat and seeing a couple of women on the street for the first time in, a week or whatever. And it was really quite an experience. But, I had also come from a situation where when I did a portrait of a man, I couldn't make eye contact with them. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even gesture at them. And so how do you make a portrait of someone that you can't look at, right? And so it was, I think in this situation, we both were just enjoying a moment of just being ourselves and in a place of comfort, right? So yeah, of course, she shared, but I also wanted to share a little bit about her world. And
Yep.
yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Suri, you picked up a camera and started documenting your region, Donbas region, where you're from, in 2014. For many of you, this was when Russia invaded Ukraine, not the recent one, the one before. How do you, what was your life before the war, and tell us a little bit more about your daily life? And I wanted to go back and ask you again, how do you unwind from living in a war, covering a war? What tricks you have found that could help you as a photographer, as a person who just wants to remember what was it like to walk in the streets and not worry about the sirens? Because you are not the only one right now. We have people living in Gaza going through that, and other places. So you may resonate with like what you're about to say. You may help a lot of people who are living through these war zones. So please share with us, also for our audience to hear from someone, and how do you do it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I can only refer to my own experience, and that's true for me. And I mean, fact is, the war started in 2014, and since 2014, I can't go to my hometown because it's occupied by Russians, and part of my family is still there. So it's a long story, and you adopted it piece by piece. I've never dreamt to be a war photographer. It came to me. That's what I can do best. And in most cases, actually, for me, it is much better to shoot than not to shoot. In photography, I find the sense of purpose. That I'm not. I'm useful in this war. I'm telling the world. I'm trying to tell the story. Thanks for inviting me here again and to see the story with me now. And sometimes it becomes hard in particular. Of course, it became much intense in 2022, right after our meeting. Mm-hmm. And I went through really tough situations, and it's actually one of them. It's like super recent. From September, I went to Lviv. It's considered to be a pretty safe city in western border of Ukraine, to shoot like routine portrait or two. And then it was one of the biggest missile attacks to Lviv, which woke me up. A few Arab ballistic Kinjal missiles came to the residential buildings, and I rushed there. And so this is Yaroslav Bazilevich, and he was evacuated from destroyed building, and he lost his wife, Yevgenia, and 3 of his daughters, whole family, four precious women and girls, Emilia, Daria, and Yarina. And here he just watching how their coffins, 1 big and 3 smaller ones, all white, covered with soil, and it's heartbreaking for me even when I speak.
Yeah.
And after, I just can't imagine what this person is going through. And for us, for photographers, journalists who are documenting it day by day, it's also hard psychologically. So, I mean, I take breaks.
How do you disconnect? What do you do?
Long walks.
Long walks?
Really long walks. We adopted a dog. She gives me problems, but purpose and love. Sometimes psychologist, and so I'm trying to keep up. But after a few days of this retreat, I still just want to grab camera and go because it's a purpose and it's bigger than me, you know.
I mean, you had to live not only as a photojournalist, but as a Ukrainian, you have to learn and adapt and live in the war. Michael, you've recently moved to Spain with your family, and after decades of 3 decades of work in major newspapers, I mean, and being our colleague. Please tell us a little bit more about that transition to focus a little bit more maybe on family, also to, and tell us about your recent, a little bit on a happier end of work right now.
Well, I kind of put this in for that reason, because this year has been a massive transition for my family and myself. And like you said, you know, it's like for 30 years in newspapers and doing that for so long, that I decided to just become a flamenco dancer and give up. No, I'm not going to do that. That would be terrible.
Where's the image?
I would be terrible. That image, that's buried away somewhere. But it was just something that my wife is Spanish, and we wanted to come to Europe for some time. And so now we are here in Spain, and I just wanted to sometimes think about it's important to go work on stories that aren't so intense when you're able to. I mean, in Sergei's case, for example, it's not so easy to do those kinds of things. But just to kind of mentally get that balance, right, to get your equilibrium back. And this is a pilgrimage in the south of Spain, in Andalusia. It's called El Rocío, and Hector Emanuel, a colleague of mine, a friend, we teach a workshop down there. And so we went down there to do the workshop, and it was extraordinary, the event, because it's so non-touristy. And it felt like going into a time warp. And for me at that time, knowing we were moving to Spain, it was just so beautiful. It was just, yes, this is it. This is why we're coming to Spain. This is why we're leaving the United States. And so that's what this one was about. And, the hardest decision was, do I have the jamón ibérico, or do I have the chorizo, or do I have the gambas al ajillo? But it was just such a remarkable event, and everybody was just so generous and warm that it really kind of helps set you up for the next intense story you may have to do, and just mentally.
So as you say, like, this is really important sometimes to not only focus on stories that could really affect you as a photographer, but right now, like,
to avoid burnout, right?
Of course, burnout. But with your experience of 3 decades, like, how did you balance family and work, heavy, long days of work, and being away from family and a child, and now, like,
I have a very patient wife, a very tolerant and patient wife. She's wonderful. She's the greatest. But in this case, it's sort of, coming here and becoming a freelancer. So that's the other thing that's been such a major transition, right? And everybody told me I was a fool to do it, and they're all right, but it was still worth it to come to live in Spain and be here in Europe. But it is difficult, and so you just kind of come to terms with it and look for those assignments and pitch those assignments. And I can't really answer your question yet because I don't know the final answer yet. It's still a work in progress.
I hope you come back and tell us in the future.
I hope so, yeah.
Carolyn, this image went viral at that time, and I want you to tell us all here a little bit more about it.
So this is sort of back to the border, and I referenced earlier walking with the migrant caravans, and so this was like 3,000, I think about 3,000 at that time. There were different waves, people from Central America. In this situation, it was a lot of Central Americans who were walking across Mexico to get to the border to seek asylum. And so, and it's really hot, it's brutal, you're on the road, you're on asphalt, and so we would leave at like 3 in the morning and walk. And so this is Camila, and Camila had been walking for several miles. It was, I think, like maybe 4 or 5 in the morning at this point, and I decided, you know, I had done like the big pulled back view, and I wanted to just follow a family and just see like, what does this feel like for a day? And so we had gotten this far, and Camila collapsed in the middle of the road, middle of the highway, and she was too tired to even like to cry out, and so she just had these tears, and you could see her hands. And so what happened was the image went viral, and I did an interview on CNN about it, and the image actually got back to her family in Honduras, and so they actually, it was the only way they knew that she was okay. And so then, fast forward, like a month later, you know, because it's a big crowd and it was growing and it was up to like 4,000 or 5,000 people, and so it's easy to lose people. We get to the border, and I'm in Tijuana, and I don't have their phone. They didn't have a phone, so I didn't know if they had made it. And I was walking through one of the like tent encampments, and I hear this squeaky little voice pop out of a tent and say, "Carolina, Carolina." And it was Camila, and it turned out that a bunch of readers and people who had seen the image had tracked her down and sent her mom like strollers so she didn't have to walk, and food, and I get goosebumps talking about it. Yeah, it was really special. It's rare that you get to see an impact of an image.
That's true, that's true. Thanks for sharing that. Sergey, tell us where Ukraine is right now, and what has changed from covering. I mean, you have seen it from the first invasion, 2014. Tell us what's happening in this image, and the latest way for you to work. Has your work changed? Have you been seeing it different? Has the war been getting worse? I mean, it's been 3 years, as we say. Just I want to know what has changed with you as a photographer from the first invasion to the last one, to the last time we had a nice dinner the night of the invasion.
Yeah. First of all, Carolina, thanks for sharing the previous story, and that's, I guess, photojournalism at its best with direct impact. So thanks for your work. And well, I mean, that's a really complicated question for 3 minutes.
Take your time.
I guess the short answer would be more and more cities and places in Ukraine are looking like this, and that's really sad. This is Toretsk, small coal mining town in eastern Ukraine, and the scene for me with this, and with many other places, is I knew them not like this. I taught photography workshop for kids here, and they made bright stories about life on their streets. And we had a community show, an exhibition in a park, and it was local DJ enthusiasts playing music like 1 kilometer from this particular place, and now it's a front line. And again, it's tremendously sad for me to observe it. And what, you know, in the beginning of big war, as we say, full-scale invasion, I was doing assignments, chasing news, and I'm still doing it, but I'm trying to slow down now more and more and do slower, deeper stories. And particularly, the one I'm doing now is I'm going to places which are still all right, but might be look like this because, you know, Russia unfortunately is advancing, and it's the way Russia coming to you. So I'm going to places like Kramatorsk, Slaviansk, Trushkivka, ones which are near the front line, but not yet there, and photographing dog shelters, old ladies doing their gardens, all kind of small things you just usually pass while you're driving to the real war, real front line. So I want to capture life until it's gone like this, and of course I hope it will not get there.
Well, we wish you all the best on your journey, and please stay safe. On the last image, Michael, I wanted to show this, and for you also to tell us, this is Gaza. For many people who've been to Gaza, very small amount of journalists been to Gaza, and now no journalists have been in Gaza other than Palestinians.
Right.
And they've been targeted. Over almost 80 journalists have been killed in Gaza. of the latest war. So what was Gaza back then, and what was it like to document with the access you had at that time, and you watching it now as many journalists who are not allowed to be in there and document and show what's happening. Please share with the audience about this place that now is like the hardest place in the world to be as a journalist to work, but also to access.
Just to survive it. This was an image I made in 2006 at a rally. I mean, it was pretty straightforward getting access to Gaza at this time. You went to the Erez crossing in Israel, and the Israelis would or would not allow you in or delayed you or whatever. And it was pretty commonplace to go in and do stories. And in 2006, that was of course, the Hezbollah-Israeli war that was going on, which were just time repeats, or history repeats itself. We're there again right now, unfortunately. But it was pretty straightforward access to Gaza at that time. And Gaza was what it's always been, right? It's essentially, it's a prison. It's a walled-in enclave that is very difficult to get in and out of if you're Palestinian. And so we would go in there periodically to do stories. This was for the Washington Post. And we met a lot of Palestinian journalists. They were just sort of coming up, right? They were getting into it. The photography was getting better and better. And now you see they're just under the worst of circumstances. They're doing extraordinary work, and very brave work and very important work there. And while members of their family perish, they're still doing this work. So I spent much of 2002 to 2010 in the Middle East, covering the invasion of Iraq, the fall of Mubarak, Gaza, West Bank, Lebanon, all that area. And Gaza was just sort of this kind of routine place we would go to do these stories. And to see it now, I mean, it's sort of like they're going for endgame here. It's horrible to see. I mean, the place is just being leveled.
It's not the same.
And
right?
we saw it, we were there when it got bombed often and all that kind of thing going on, but nothing to the extent of what we're seeing now.
Yeah, I mean, just compared to Sergei, like in Ukraine, at least you are allowed to leave. In Gaza, like the borders has been shut. And,
I mean, a few, like Loé,
yeah.
the photographer that was working with the
us.
Washington Post, was able to get out through Egypt to Rafah, and he had recently had an exhibit in the south of France, but he couldn't leave to go to the south of France because he couldn't get the visa to go back into Egypt. Yeah. And many people I met, they had a Fulbright scholarship given to them, but they couldn't leave to do it.
Exactly.
So it's just a horrid situation.
Well, thanks for sharing that image with us. And all three of you, I hope you enjoy Siena. Please do. And I want to thank each one of you for being so vulnerable with us and with the audience and talking to us about some of the behind the scene of the intimate moments, about some of your greatest photojournalism that you've created, some of you in the last decades, and we're very lucky to have you guys here. And ladies and gentlemen, Sergei, Michael, and Carolyn.
And Salwan. And Salwan.
Thank you.
Thank you to the panel.